You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network under the Rocky Mountain Rooftop banner. I'm your host, Skyler Timmons, joined always by my co-host here, Evan Lang, looking wide-eyed.
What trade deadline? There's a deadline for making trades?
There is, yes. There used to be another one, too, but that no longer exists. And we're also joined here by friend of the show, our good buddy, who's always there in the Rockies clubhouse and writes over at justbaseball.com. It's our good buddy, Patrick Lyons.
What's up, gents? Are we still going to be friends after the Rockies Insider gets started on Monday and I'm doing daily podcasts, or is there enough time and space for Rockies fans to squeeze us both in? I think we can still play nice, right?
I don't know. I mean, you starting a podcast on Monday is news to me, mister.
Yeah, I had some help from both Just Baseball, this is a Just Baseball show, and Blake Street Banner. They're helping out and doing some things for me and behind the scenes, and I really appreciate that. So yeah, going to be doing the pods, having guests on, talking with players, YouTube channel with tons of video, pregame, postgame conversations. So a lot more content at just the right time, right when the Broncos are starting, right when the trade deadline and the draft is over. That's just how I operate a little bit.
Yeah,
but
when interest in the Rockies is peak,
that's when I step up. That's when I do my best work, to be honest. But yeah, no, this is going to be an ongoing thing that takes a while to get going, but I'm really excited to do that. So it's gonna be fun.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. And that'll be it for Patrick Lyons as we remove him from the show now.
Security.
We're always happy to have him here with us. And I think people have been heated. We could have done, Evan and I planned to maybe do a trade deadline recap episode earlier in the week. But in order to do that, there would have had to have been more than 2 trades that the Rockies made. And we had already talked about one of them on the previous episode of the podcast. And so we let ourselves stew throughout the week and see more stuff come out from the Rockies, just talking about the deadline itself and everything. So we'll kind of try to recap our thoughts. But overall, with the trade deadline recap, 2 trades were made. Relievers Nick Mears was sent to the Milwaukee Brewers, where he revealed, hey, I learned I'd been tipping pitches from somebody. And then Jalen Beeks sent to the Pittsburgh Pirates for a prospect. Luis Peralta, whose brother is a Brewer, so it's all interconnected here, I guess. So a total of 3 pitching prospects come back to the Rockies over 2 trades, and then crickets. Nothing else the rest of the way, as Cal Quantrill stays around, Elias Diaz, Jacob Stallings stick around. Everybody stayed around because we just had to lose that game against the Angels that night, and we needed everybody on deck for it. But get your guys' reactions here. Day of trade deadline, your thoughts or your reactions when time expired, Rockies did nothing.
Angry. I think a lot of people saw me become very mad about the whole thing on Twitter, in our writer's room. Just the Rockies had one job going into the trade deadline, and that was to shed people, make room for young guys, and get prospects. And they didn't do it. And we all got spoiled last year when Bill Schmidt came out of nowhere and traded 5 players for 7 pitching prospects at the deadline. And I thought, okay, we're going to get more of that this year, obviously. You know, we've got so many guys that we can trade. You know, Elias Diaz, sure, his value is way down, but I'm sure we can get something for him. Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomber, Jacob Stallings, Dan Beeks. Like, there were people to trade away, and it's not because I dislike any of these guys, but rather because it would have been the right play. You know, Elias Diaz especially. When we saw Carson Kelly got traded, and you know his numbers are almost identical to Elias Diaz's throughout this season. But you know, that's the one I do kind of get at the end of it, where Diaz, the time to trade him would have been 2 months ago when there were other teams looking for catchers and Diaz was red hot. His value just absolutely tanked because he injured both calves. He was visibly hobbled on the field, and he just hasn't been hitting that well recently. And so I get it. But to come away from deadline day having made no additional trades after the first two, one of which came out of nowhere and ended up being kind of embarrassing for the Rockies as a result, where, you know, Nick Mears goes on in his first interview in the Brewers clubhouse going, "Oh yeah, the Rockies coaches never caught that I was tipping pitches." It's a bad look for the team. It's immensely frustrating, and it just leaves so many question marks for the rest of this season and next season, because Diaz is supposedly gone after this year, and half the other guys we probably should have traded will be going into their final year on their contracts next year. And it made no sense. Like, I wrote an article on Purple Row that was, here is what the Rockies do to have a good trade deadline. And they ticked off basically none of the boxes except for trading Jalen Beeks.
Okay, there you go. How about you, Patrick, on your day covering the Rockies that day and whatnot?
It was a trade deadline overall that is still an improvement based on the history of the Rockies, right? 2012, they trade Marco Scutaro to the Giants, and then he wins a World Series, and we get crickets at pretty much every trade deadline when the Rockies are out of it and almost refuse to wave the white flag. Not because they actually think that they could win the battle, but they would just rather go down in a blaze of glory in a sense. But there is no glory because, you know, you miss out on the postseason and you get nothing for your valuable trade assets. So, yeah, the 4 trades last year, bringing in all those pitching prospects was great. Certainly an improvement over the previous trade deadline where they were the only team in 2022 to not swing a deal. 2021, you traded Michael Givens, and then other than the Troy Tulowitzki trade in 2015, you know, you've got a lot of years in which you've got a losing record and no prospects to show for that, which is common. It's just a common and understood practice in Major League Baseball, and I think in professional sports in many ways. And so you look and say, hey, that's an improvement, so that's a good thing. But then when you do that thing, which is fair, more times than not, it's very fair to compare the Rockies to other organizations. Rockies have certain, not all, but certain unique challenges. And when you compare them with the other teams that were sellers at the deadline, you see that the Rockies only got 3 prospects. And of the 9 teams that traded away veterans to bring back prospects, they were 9th in those 9 teams in bringing back prospects. So in that sense, they definitely did fail. So it was an improvement. It was frustrating that of the 30 trades that were made on the final deadline day, the Rockies were not involved in any of them. So, and to your point, Evan, you know, the Nick Mears trade is one that in theory could have been made in the offseason, and you could have maybe cleared out some of the players and push the markets for those players that you are really trying to get rid of. Because why isn't Nick Mears a pitcher that you want to keep around for your future in 3-4 years when you're back to relevance? If Ryan McMahon is a key piece for 3 years from now, couldn't Nick Mears be? Again, Nick Mears doesn't have the same value as a Ryan McMahon. But still, if you're going to be giving up players that have multiple years left and not, you know, get rid of those players that are going to be gone in free agency in which you get nothing, you might be, you know, misappropriating your assets or your effort towards which guys you want to sell first and foremost. So, yeah, I understand how Rockies fans are disappointed, but unfortunately, it has become a little par for the course.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, is it seems like a lot of the time for the Rockies, and Dan O'Dowd talked about this on the Foul Territory podcast, where the Rockies are always constantly just looking at the game in front of them, right in front of them, of this is the game we need to win, instead of, you know, focusing on the future, looking towards the future. They're just looking at what's right in front of us. the game tonight. Well, Cal Quantrill's starting tonight, so we can't trade him. He's our starter for tonight. Who are we going to replace him with? It's stuff like that it seems like the team does on a regular basis of maybe overvaluing their own guys. Maybe they just didn't like the offers they were getting for their guys. That could be one aspect of it. Or another, they just kind of just overvalue of this guy is critical to our team right now. We can't lose him. And so it's a lot of those aspects to me that feels like that's where the team kind of runs into trouble when it comes to a trade deadline type of thing.
Well, I mean, I think we very clearly found out that they overvalued a lot of their guys just from some of the comments we got right after the trade deadline, where they talked about, you know, it's a fire sale, but we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna take below what we think is the value for our guys, or how. I'm still very frustrated about all this.
For the Rockies, a liquidation sale is everything 100% full price, 0% off.
But we understand why businesses do that, because they're basically there's almost a deadline where you say we're going to be out of business, we're bankrupt, and we no longer have these assets. The bank's going to seize them. But if we sell them now, we at least get something. Sure, the customer is getting a great deal, but shouldn't you be worrying about your bottom line? Shouldn't you be worrying about your business or your future by saying, hey, you know what? We're going to take 25 cents on the dollar, and that's going to do something. And I think in the sporting world, again, I don't know that the Rockies need to take 25 cents on the dollar. Then again, you're building a relationship, I think, with teams. And that's something that the Rockies don't have with too many other clubs, because they've put themselves in the corner and they haven't played well with the others. I think we saw that the last couple of years, where it seemed like every other trade was a deal with Cleveland, Cincinnati, or Atlanta. And so working it with other teams and building up that rapport, saying, hey, if you have a conversation with us and we get so far down the line in our conversation, this is not going to be a wasted time. And I think the Rockies do have an unfortunate history of wasting other teams' time when the owner, like Peter Gammon said, I think it was 2015, there was a deal struck. Jorge De La Rosa was going to Baltimore, and Baltimore was going to be able to get Eduardo Rodriguez. And at the last second, Dick Monfort, according to Peter Gammon, stepped in, squashed that deal. So then that deal gets worked out between Boston and Baltimore, and Andrew Miller goes. Yeah. And Jorge De La Rosa leaves as a free agent at the end of the year, when you could have traded him and still re-signed him, and you don't have Eduardo Rodriguez. I mean, imagine him if he would have been in that rotation. Imagine if you would have had, the compensation pick for when he left in free agency, if you give him a qualifying offer. Like, obviously there's a domino effect. It's a butterfly effect that we don't know if, his career would have gone the same way. But if you waste other teams' time, they're just not going to bother with you. And I think that they have an image problem that they have to work on a bit.
And I think it kind of comes across as this year, again, they wasted other teams' time. It's like Bill Schmidt says, you talk to other teams and try and find things to match up with. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Some other guys made decisions, short-term, long-term views of things. It wasn't from lack of effort in conversation. Did we get to the finish line with some deals? No. But we got a feel for the value of some of our players. We're trying to get better. Like, first of all, you should have known the value of your players because they've been playing for you all season, and most of them have been with you for several years now. But second of all, you're clearly overvaluing them, and you're wasting other teams' time. So they're talking and talking and talking, and then nothing comes of it, and the other teams go, well, then what was the point of all this? This was dumb. This was a waste of our time.
Mm-hmm. Or if they, call you about other assets that might be available, and you just kind of hang up the phone. Hey, is Ryan McMahon? We're really interested in him. No, we got to hold on to him. He's one of our guys. We're not getting rid of him. The fact that you can hold on to him, that's still their prerogative, but to shut down conversations and like, okay, well, what do you got? Like, what are you offering? No, even just entertain those thoughts. It's just an unwillingness to really shake things up. I think that's a common thread, like you mentioned, Patrick, of people up the ladder stepping in and squashing on deals that maybe could have happened. Maybe there's other deals that have happened where it came really close, but then Dick Monfort's like, no, we're not doing that. Unfortunately, Nolan Arenado was not that case. But a John Gray situation from a couple years ago, that would kind of be the same type of thing of, I could see somebody like, no, we're going to squash that. We're keeping him. And then they don't keep him, which is the great poetic justice of it all.
Well, then not only they didn't keep him, they lowballed him, which ended his willingness to stay. And he ended up signing with Texas on a pretty solid deal for him. But, it is because Dick Monfort has a history of stepping in and squashing deals. Like, we know this to be true. But then for this year especially, it seems the whole deadline just feels like it was. And it sucks to say it because I do think the Rockies got some pretty solid returns for Nick Mears and Jalen Beeks. I like the 3 pitchers that we got. But the fact that we held on to so many people, it just raises further questions to just what the Rockies are going to do next year, because we're going to be bloated at basically every position with a mix of veteran guys and prospects who are like, you need to get playing time for this guy. So if they're not going to offer Elias Diaz a qualifying offer because they're going to be terrified that he would accept a, $20 million contract when Elias Diaz is not a $20 million player. Mm-hmm. And so if they don't sign him to an extension, he's going to walk for nothing. If they don't work out the mutual option for Jacob Stallings, he's gone. And then next year, if they don't get extensions or figure out what they're doing with Austin Gomber, Cal Quantrill, and Brendan Rodgers, they're all gone. If they don't figure out what's going on with Herman Marquez, he's gone after 2025. Just all this is, and we'll talk about this more in the second half, but it's all just like, there's no forward thinking here. It's like you said, you're not planning for the future. You're stuck thinking about the games that are in front of you, when whatever happens for the rest of this season doesn't matter. The Rockies could win 30 of their next 40 something games and it wouldn't matter.
That'd be fun though.
Certainly would. Yeah, it's. I think it's frustrating for a lot of fans when they go and look back and say 3 years ago we kind of had a similar trade deadline situation, and the team was still recovering after that initial loss of Nolan Arenado, and 3 years later, despite what will be the second 100 loss season in a row, 390 some lost seasons in a row, or is it 4 now? I honestly have lost track. It's probably 4, so maybe 95 plus 3 in a row on that. But that there's nothing really solved. You feel good about the farm system, but again, it's going to take that much longer for them to have an opportunity to make an impact when those guys could already be here and playing if you had gone about your business a little bit differently in 2021. And so are we going to be here in 2027 all with our long gray beards and balding pates saying the same thing about 2024 was a real missed opportunity, but now they've got a whole other new crop of players that they drafted in 2025, 2026, 2027, so we feel great about those guys. And again, it's just a cycle that goes over and over again.
This is how we all felt in like 2012 and 2013, and then we felt it again in 2019, 2020. And now it's just a never-ending cycle. And it's funny because, we're still reading for the Nolan Arenado trade. The Nolan Arenado trade should have been the signal to this organization. All right, it's time to blow it all up. Let's just start fresh. And you know what? If they had done that, we might actually be in some kind of contention window right now. But instead, they're always pushing back. No, we can't rebuild. Oh, competing is just around the corner. Oh, we got all of our veterans full of grit and determination. And look, here's Jake Cave to start more games than he's ever started in his entire career.
I mentioned this on the Blake Street Banner podcast that in 2021, the Washington Nationals, again, just 2 years removed from winning a World Series, but they blew it up, right? They tanked. All right, Juan Soto, they got rid of him that offseason, but they traded Max Scherzer, Trey Turner to really, really boost their rebuild, and they're going to get there before the Rockies get there. Again, that's part of their game plan. That was tanking. And if you take that off the table, which is something that, first off, teams can't necessarily even do quite in the same way like they did before the this previous CBA. But if you take that game plan off the table, which is something that it seems the Rockies have taken off the table, that is now yet another strategy that you cannot utilize, because free agency becomes difficult, not just because some players don't want to come to Colorado. If you're a pitcher, that's the last resort. But also because Colorado hasn't really figured out how to get value in their free agents. Who are going to be those players that are going to be able to maintain at altitude and perform when going from 5280 above sea level down to sea level? And, making trades is going to be hard when you don't want to part with valuable assets. So draft and develop is really the only way. That's why they continue to say that. And that is true, but that's that makes their job that much more challenging if they only have that one route. And they don't have to, but that's just really the lot that they've created for themselves in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this last thing before we go to our first break is the Nationals are right now better than the Rockies. They're still a losing team, but they're only like 9 games below 500 right now. And they're also full of really young, interesting guys. You've got CJ Abrams, you've got Jacob Young, you've got Jake Irvin, you've got Keber Ruiz, who's only 25, despite the fact that it feels like he's been in this league forever. You've got guys, and yet they were still sellers at the deadline. Like, they got rid of more people.
Mm-hmm. Thin out the herd. Yeah, I think this trade deadline has more rippling effects, like we've talked about, because it just complicates roster construction and, maybe in the Rockies' eyes, kind of making this delusion of turning the corner, which will be our conversation in the second part. But before we get to there, we'll take a quick break here on Affected by Altitude, and then we'll hop right into that conversation. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back here on Affected by Altitude. Patrick Lyons is joining us here. Evan and Skyler, myself. And trade deadline comes and goes. Okay. Well, then it's after the trade deadline we start getting a little bit more of the reasonings and the outlooks, perspectives of guys like Bill Schmidt, Bud Black, things like that. And I think the one thing that really stuck out was an interview that Bill Schmidt did with Thomas Harding over at MLB.com that kind of, spouting out the same talking points we've heard from the Rockies for several years of, basically, to recap, we need to be healthier, we need to play better, and hey, we're right around the corner. We feel good about the guys we have. And they're points that we've heard for several years now. It's one of those things where, can this team actually compete in 2025? Or is it like we were saying before, they're just wishful thinking and trying to give themselves some hope that may be misplaced?
It's wishful thinking entirely. It's borderline delusional is how wishful that thinking is.
But hey, we can play 500 baseball, though.
I don't think we can. I think even thinking about 500 ball next year is delusional after the last 2 seasons we've had, and just a failure to recognize what's going on. Like, the team just so clearly doesn't get it. Like, one of the first quotes from Bill Schmidt in this article you're talking about with Thomas Harding, he says, "There's a lot of things that people don't see, but at the end of the day, they've got to see to believe." And it's like, but now, what have we seen over the last several years, the last several losing seasons, 100 losses last year, 100 likely losses this year, that makes us believe that we are anywhere close to contention?
Yeah, that quote belongs on like one of those wood planks that's hanging up in some lady's kitchen.
Live, laugh, love.
It's wine o'clock.
Yeah, but he shows these same talking points we've heard forever, where it's, oh, don't worry, we know what we're doing. You just got to believe us, and then you'll see. But the thing is, none of the Rockies' actions really show us anything that gives us a basis to base like some sort of faith on, because it seems like they've acted in bad faith, whether it comes to a trade deadline or just how they go about with roster construction and managing guys on that roster, it's hard to trust that they do have a plan. And from all cases, it looks like there is no plan
There's
and
both.
no vision.
Yeah, there's both no trust by the fan base, but also no penalty for the front office.
Mhm.
Right? There are no consequences ultimately for running the team this way. And for better or worse, we know how difficult and different of an environment Coors Field can be. Denver as a whole is just a different environment because for most teams, if you were to be this bad and have the worst 4-year stretch in franchise history or 5-year stretch, you would see a serious decline in attendance, and Colorado does not have an attendance issue. So the message by the front office, I would think, besides, again, looking at the standings, doesn't make you feel good, but you can feel better knowing that both, hey, we think we've made a couple changes and we might be better. So I feel good about that. And I think the fans probably are believing, what we're offering, and they do trust. So it's a difficult and unique situation, and it doesn't appear like there has been a change, right? Despite maybe saying that there's been a change, the evidence definitely is to the contrary.
It all goes back to the beginning of the season when Dick Monfort comes out and says, we basically when he comes out and says the only way to win in Colorado is the way that I get it done, when he goes, well, we've tried bringing people in and it didn't work, or their ideas wouldn't work, so we didn't try bringing other people in. Just this self-fulfilling prophecy of no matter what we do, it's not going to work unless I'm the one who figures it out, because they're just so damn stubborn. And I've said this many, many times because so many people go, oh, Dick Monfort doesn't care about winning. Dick Monfort only cares about money. It's like, well, first of all, yeah, he cares about money. He's a billionaire. That's what they do. They want money. Cool. But if you've ever talked to Dick Monfort, if you've ever interacted at all with this front office, you know that they do care about winning, but they are too damn stubborn to accept winning in any other way than how they figure it out. But the problem is they've had 32 years to figure it out and haven't done it. And it's not even the consequences of attendance, because I've always been on the side of, look, if you want to boycott Rockies games, if you don't want to go, that is your prerogative. No judgment from me on that. But understand that your seat is just going to get filled by somebody else. But at the same time, for Rockies fans, I don't tell people to go boycott, because it is not your responsibility as a fan to fix this team by depriving yourself of watching baseball if you love baseball, if watching the Rockies if you love the Rockies. It's not your responsibility. It's never the fans' responsibility to, quote unquote, send a message to fix things. Because, first of all, I don't think that message would ever be received. If there was a serious decline in attendance, I don't think that's the message that they would get of, oh, we're doing everything wrong, we have to fix it. Because we know how stubborn these people are. And that's the other thing, is the stubbornness, but also the intense insularness of it all. Is any other team, there would be consequences internally for this performance. Bud Black would have been fired probably years ago, but definitely after last year, and there wouldn't have been talks of an extension up until this preseason. Bill Schmidt might have already been jettisoned, if not for his performance last year. But we never ever see that. Darryl Scott, all the other coaches who aren't bad people, but they've shown that they're not great coaches, and that sounds mean, but when have we ever seen Darryl Scott go out to the mound and talk to a pitcher, and the pitcher recovers or bounces back?
It's usually bouncing back with a home run right after the visit.
Yeah. You see Darryl Scott go out there and you assume, well, this game's about to get out of hand, and 9 times out of 10, it does.
My brother's working theory is that he goes out there and curses them. I don't know how, but he does that and leaves a little hex on them.
And it's the same with Buddy. And I deal with some interesting people online who have a very unique perspective on Bud Black, our intrepid skipper. And it really is like Bud was, and we've said this time and time again, the perfect manager for where he inherited this team. And, Patrick Saunders was talking about this a little bit, is when Walt Weiss left and Bud Black came in, Walt Weiss told him, I really felt at the time like this team was about to turn a corner because the roster was stacked. And it ended up being that Bud Black was the guy for that short contention window. Playoff burst in 2017 and 2018. But then after that, as the team needs to rebuild, as the team needs to get younger, as the team needs to stop prioritizing the play of aging veterans because they've got that grit and determination that he loves so much, Buddy's not the guy. He's definitely not been the guy since 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay to acknowledge, but the Rockies don't want to acknowledge that because they're intensely loyal to Bud Black. But also, I still think Dick Monfort is always afraid of looking stupid. And I think it's been especially prevalent since the Nolan Arenado trade.
I know you can't trade players now after the deadline, but could you trade a prospect for a manager? And would you want to bring in Pedro Grifol? Yes or no? There's that situation. 20 and continuing.
See, ironically, I said back in the day that Bud Black would have been a really good manager for that White Sox team a couple years ago, where they had a little contention window open up and they had a mix of young players and older players and were actually doing pretty good.
Yeah, I could see that. It certainly would have been better than Tony La Russa. That's for sure.
Yes. But, man, this team.
Something that I think we talk about this a lot is that Rockies' loyalty to a fault or just a lack of perspective. Did the Rockies get to the postseason in back-to-back years solely because we had Bud Black as manager? No,
no.
I wouldn't say that. It was because we had a good homegrown rotation, young rotation that was primed to hit big. You had a stacked lineup of some really good players, and all those pieces just fell right into place.
I think you also got to give credit to some of the free agents that they brought in. While, again, if you're looking at wins above replacement, that's going to skew things. But I know that Rockies fans can look and say, hey, Gerardo Parra was a lot better than what some of the numbers would suggest. And I think now all of us looking back can see Ian Desmond and go, that was not the atrocious deal that it was kind of made out to be
of course
at
not.
the time. And so credit to the free agents, credit to those free agents, and credit to the general manager at the time, Jeff Bridich, who we all know how it ended up falling apart, but still last GM and only GM to take this team to back-to-back postseasons.
Yeah, and you can go back and contribute stuff to Dan O'Dowd doing stuff of helping draft guys and Bill Schmidt being head of scouting and that stuff.
Yeah.
So it doesn't all fall onto Bud Black, and yet it seems like everything with this team over these last couple of years revolves around Bud Black's our guy. He's going to get us there. He's the one who's going to save this team, and we want him to be here for the next window of contention.
Yeah.
He's going to help this team win, but a lot of faith is being placed in a guy who it's not all on him. He's not making or breaking the team in a lot of the ways. He's not the manager for a team that needs to rebuild, not reconstruct like they keep saying. They don't need to just shuffle some pieces around. No, it's an overhaul of getting a new voice that can help focus on developing and building something instead of we got to win right now and Bud Black's the guy that's going to do it. So here you go, Jake Cave.
What it really is Bud Black is not responsible for how bad the Rockies are. Bud Black is not solely responsible for where the Rockies are at right now as a team. What he is emblematic of where the Rockies are at right now. Mm-hmm. He has a lot of outdated ideas. He prefers, veterans over the young guys, and just the way he manages the team is emblematic of everything that is wrong with the Rockies where they are at here in 2024. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why so many people, I don't want to say hate, but blame Bud Black for what's going on, despite the fact that if you fired Bud Black today and hired any manager, honestly, there's not going to be an immediate improvement. There might not be an improvement at all. Like, this team's problems are so much deeper than just a manager or just the general manager. It's everything.
Mm-hmm. Something that goes back here, and we can continue this conversation about just overall deadline, the talking points. It's that wishy-washiness of not wanting to commit to a guy sometimes, where they're talking about, well, what if Drew Romo's ready, who we talked to here on the podcast last week, which was fun stuff. You should go check that interview out over on our YouTube channel, a rooftop mingle, if you will. But he's getting close, having a really good year in AAA. Keeping both of your catchers now, it kind of complicates things of, well, what if he shows that he's ready to get called up and contribute this season for the rest of these next couple months? And these things have a way of working themselves out. That quote, and we've talked about this on our writers channel and stuff, but it's that, well, we'll see how it works out. And I think it was Patrick that pointed, if that kind of statement has no urgency to it as an organization.
Yeah, I think that the difficulty and the trouble with a statement like these things, will work themselves out. Yeah, things do work themselves out. I know for me, say, for example, it took me a while to get my career off the ground and to be successful in sports media. And it worked itself out, and it happy ending. But in the meantime, there was a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of meandering that went into that. And when it comes to sports, losing that time is losing parts of players' careers. And I think that's really one of the critical things. You go back and look and say, hey, this guy only had one or two opportunities in the postseason, if at all. Or, you see someone like Dan Marino, oh man, boom, goes to the Super Bowl his rookie season. And you're like, this guy is going to be an all-time great. And then he never gets back again. Now, again, I'm not talking about anything about the Dolphins front office and complacency there and things of that nature, but things working themselves out. Again, is this just a poor choice of words, right? Some kind of defense mechanism in a sense. But if we're really going to take someone at their words, when you just kind of let something play out, you say, okay, right now we've got 4 outfielders at AA. It'll work itself out. What year is that? What year do you realize who the 2 outfielders are that are going to be, the real keepers, or maybe even just one is going to be the one? And that's not to even say that another franchise would know. Like the Dodgers would be able to immediately just say, this is the one you keep. These are the ones you get rid of. It's definitely harder than that. But again, for a fan base, I think that is a little bit frustrated. You can look at it and have that interpretation of, well, in the time that it takes to work itself out, a lot of time and a lot of seasons are lost while you wait.
Yeah. What I pointed out in our writer's room earlier today of, these things have a way of working itself out. Yeah, it only took us 11 years to find the answer at center field. After we traded Dexter Fowler, it's been just like a revolving door in center field with a variety of different people. And I don't want to call, we did have Charlie Blackmon play some center field for that time, but but even then with David Dahl, it wasn't really an answer. They never really had an answer for center field.
Drew Stubby. I was a personal favorite of he was one of my personal favorites. But if you're I'll direct this towards Patrick. If you're in charge of the Rockies going into this offseason, because they're going to have to be busy and make some decisions this offseason, what do you feel you'd need to do, to help get this team to turn a corner if you're in charge of the Rockies this offseason?
Man, we've touched on it a bunch. I don't know that the pieces are here right now, right? There was a time in which they had this core group of players that, despite people from outside our market looking in at the Rockies roster and saying, I don't know who's and Senzatella, like, who are these people? I'm gonna go for the under. And it was no, take the over, because they're gonna be a lot better than people think. And now they're in a world in which they're not necessarily worse than people think, but they've got holes, right? They have no answers in the bullpen whatsoever. If you're mocking up the 2025 bullpen, you've got Victor Vodnik. I mean, that's quite literally it. And you can hope that you're going to get a much better version of Justin Lawrence. You're going to hope that Jake Bird bounced back to really what he was his entire first 2 years, but you still have all of these questions. So, the task, if I were running the team, it would be to reset, would be to continue the rebuild that, probably should have been going on a little bit more harder, a little bit more advanced the last couple years, because I just don't know that, there's a core here that you can rely upon. That's not to say that, Nolan Jones and Brenton Doyle, Ezekiel Tover, these are borderline all-star players. And for Jones, the injuries are obviously a concern. It almost takes him out of that conversation, but they might not be that fully formed player. Like when we go ahead and in 6 years from now, we might look back and say, hey, there were actually a lot of really solid guys on that 2024 roster, but they weren't those guys yet. Mm-hmm. I've said this before, window of contention represents time, getting all those guys together in the same place and same time. If you take the greatest players in Rockies history and you assemble them all, they don't even need to have their greatest seasons ever. Just have an average year. That team is going to win a World Series. The reason why the Rockies have only barely scratched one World Series out so far is because none of those guys have been on the same team at the same time. They've been dispersed over 30 plus years. So it's really about getting all of your best assets together at the same time. And while there are definitely some really, really good assets right now on this team, you still need a lot more. And I don't, and there's plenty in the farm system, but you are still, I think, only a third of the way from getting where you need to be. There's a third here right now on the roster. There's a third in the farm system. And then there's another third magically out there as free agents or players on other rosters that you need to identify to acquire in order to get there. So they're only 1/3 of the way, through this thing. And that needs to be sped up a lot more.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you were talking about with the national media and the national fan base for baseball is never going to truly recognize a great Rockies team when it's happening. Because remember how that 2017 Rockies team, that was a pretty good team when you look at it. You had Charlie Blackmon in his absolute prime. You had DJ LeMahieu busting out. And I remember being really mad back then because it was Keith Law who said DJ LeMahieu is the worst all-star. But then looking back, we go, it's like, man, that was a really dumb thing to say because DJ was great that year and put together multiple great seasons after that. You had Nolan Arenado and Carlos Gonzalez. You had some decent pitching. And same for 2018 too. But it's like you're saying, this team right now doesn't have all the ingredients to make that hearty stew. Like, we can't get a gumbo going because a third of the ingredients are still at the store.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what it comes down to. For me, is they're kick the can down the road, but it's you have the pieces in place. You can bring them up and just see what you have. You got to sift through some stuff because right now, if they're keeping some of these pitchers that they didn't trade, your 2025 opening day pitching rotation could be German Marquez, Cal Quantrill, Austin Gomber, Kyle Freeland, and Antonio Senzatella. Where's Ryan Feltner go? Where does a Tanner Gordon fit in? Is Peter Lambert still a thing? Noah Davis, what are you doing with him? Where did Carson Palmquist go?
To piggyback your point, what's the 2026 rotation? And again, we're definitely future casting. But you say, okay, well, that's fine. You lose Gomber, you lose Quantrill, you lose Marquez. There's gonna be 3 guys. But what's their track record now? Yeah. Carson Palmquist in the 2026 opening day starting rotation, you go, that's great. What did his 2024 look like? Because so far, what does 2025 look like? Because he's yet to even make his debut. So is he going straight from the minors into a rotation spot, or are you going to slowly work his way in? You don't have that room because of what you just said. There's a solid rotation coming back for 2025. And I think the mistake that the front office might be doing is the math that, hey, if everybody has a career year, this team is in contention. All they got to do is be good enough to the end of July, and then you can maybe add a couple pieces, right? If you're willing to give up prospects, which then is a whole other conversation. But all they got to do is be good for the first 4 months of the season. And at their best, this team is good enough to be around, if not slightly above 500. But we just know the reality of baseball and all sports is you're not going to have everybody having a career year at the same time, let alone healthy at the same time. So how do you transition from 2024 is a 100-loss season? The rotation's really solid in 2025. 2026, we don't even know who it's going to be. Yeah. Meanwhile, again, still haven't addressed a bullpen. So you could have a great rotation, but if you've got one guy to hand a ball to in the ninth, everyone's going 8 innings. There's problems. There's problems.
There's just still too many question marks because right now McMahon's a free agent after what? 2026?
7.
So, okay. Third base, locked down. Shortstop, Ezekiel Tovar, locked down. Shortstop, second base, first base, left field, center field, maybe Brenton Doyle, but you don't know because they haven't locked it down. Right field, catcher, bullpen, there's a question mark for every single position. And that's despite the fact that the Rockies have a great farm system. Like, I'll say it. Like, we're underrated to the point of I legitimately think our farm system is really good. Having watched a ton of minor league baseball this season, Fresno and Spokane and Hartford, and even some glimpses down in Albuquerque, this is a good farm system with promising prospects. But we still have nothing but question marks for a variety of reasons, from there being too many prospects, honestly, and having to figure that out. And, it's an excess of riches, but hoarding gets you nowhere. Like, what's the point of having millions of dollars if you're not going to spend it on anything cool?
Hey, we got Chris Bryant for $27 million a year. That'll work. Yeah, there's just so many questions. And so I think them thinking, 25 is going to be a good year. We're going to turn a corner. There's too many questions. Too many things have to go right.
Yeah.
Where logically, if you look at the way this baseball team is and just the sport in general, it doesn't work out that way. Yeah. You got to have better depth. You got to have young guys that pan out. You have to have maybe some other veterans you got to have a plan. You got to know who's managing your dang team. Yeah. And we don't even know that yet.
The fact that they're saying, 2025 could be a year we turn the corner. But when you look at 2026 and you basically have no idea what the organization looks like in 2026 from top to bottom, outside of maybe 2 players, that's a concern.
They just got to sift through it. And that's part of rebuilding, not reconstructing, rebuilding.
You got to knock the house down to build a new one on its foundation.
Yeah, I think there's some teams. This must have been either on the Just Baseball trade deadline show or on Who's Better Baseball with Ryan Finkelstein, where the word that I'm surprised isn't really used. I think retooling is common, but if we're going to say rebuild, you're tearing something down and you're building it back up. We should keep with construction terms, remodeling. Rockies love to remodel, but they hate to rebuild. And some teams can remodel and it works. They've got a strong foundation. I mean, you look at the Toronto Blue Jays, what they did trading away everybody except Gausman, Bassett, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Bo Bichette, and you go, they've got one more year where they could remodel and maybe make it work. Whereas, you need more than just a remodel in Denver.
Yeah, whereas then you look at the Marlins, they're rebuilding.
Yeah.
And so there's avenues, and the Rockies are somehow just like stuck in that middle between the two of not really doing either.
The Rockies are experimenting with a new backsplash in the kitchen, but there's a giant hole in the floor. You're prioritizing the wrong thing.
Rockies are backsplashing. Okay, we've created a new baseball term.
There you go. But
I don't like how that's.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's kind of you guys are gross.
You're gross. How dare you?
Dude, I didn't
This is
hear
a
it.
family program.
I did not hear it until you said it. How about? Come on. All right. Well, let's pivot. They are swatching their remodel, right? You getting paint swatches, and they're still trying to determine if they want to remodel or rebuild, but they're just watching. They're swatching. All right, you guys are jerks. Forget it.
No, that
This is
actually,
a load of barnacles.
that actually kind of works. The Rockies are looking at paint swatches, and they haven't even built the wall yet.
There you go. Either that or they're millennials or Gen Zs and they don't even own a house yet. So what are they doing?
That's an optimistic yet if we're making that comparison.
Yeah.
Well, the Rockies do lease Coors Field, so you might be onto something.
There you go.
Can I lease Coors Field? I know there are some rooms that I could live in that people don't use.
It's true. Anyways, we'll take this segment ran quite long, but hey, that's okay. But when we come back, we'll have a little bit shorter one where we go over some player of the month stuff because it is August now, so we got to go over July. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back for a short third segment. We're back here on Affected by Altitude, and it's been a fun one. Good conversation here. Property analogies, all that good stuff. But there was one bit of good news that came from July in total, and it was that one Mr. Brenton Doyle was named the National League Player of the Month. Well deserved for our Gold Glove center fielder who had a phenomenal month, and it really helped. It's just been building on what's been a really good year for our center fielder that we love quite a bit on this show.
Yeah, and it was tough because for a little bit in parts of July, there were some other players who were like, maybe this guy's coming for the crown. So that guy Tyler Fitzgerald in San Francisco, who was just like red hot for a little bit out of nowhere. But ultimately it came down to Brenton Doyle, and man, did he deserve it. Over 25 games, 24 starts in July, he had an OPS of 1.194, hit 11 home runs, a triple, 7 doubles. He was good, and he's continuing to remain hot here in August, but just an out of this world July filled with crazy diving catches and just tearing the cover off the ball. And he didn't actually steal that many bases in July. And that's because a bunch of his hits were extra base hits and home runs.
He wouldn't stop hitting home runs.
Yeah. When you're always past first base already, there's a lot less opportunity to steal.
Mm-hmm.
But we're seeing now, and this is what makes me so happy about Brenton Doyle, is we're seeing him continue to grow from last year more than I think any other player on this team. And he's already as of recording, he needs one more home run for a 2020 season. That's a huge step up from last year where, he got to 20 steals and over 10 home runs just at the very end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Brenton Doyle, this is the kind of season where you look at him and you go, maybe this is the guy. Maybe we're locking him down long term. Maybe we do the same thing we do with Ezekiel Tovar.
Mm-hmm.
I do it in a heartbeat. I think he's shown more than enough at this point that you can say, all right, here's our center fielder. There's the position knocked out. Let's move on to the next ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Doyle was fantastic. I think he was player of the week to start the month and just continued to stay hot. It's funny. I had a good friend of mine who covers the Diamondbacks text me saying, I really thought Eugenio Suarez had this player of the month locked up. Like he was getting ready to write an article, get prepared for the graphics. And then he said, then I found Brenton Doyle. Like I saw what he did with his 11 home runs, 27 RBI, just a historical month. Right. And it's funny because I think in the writer's room where you guys graciously allowed me to hang out, I came up with a list of all the player of the month award winners, and it's a who's who of the greatest Rockies of all time: Galarraga, Bichette, Walker, Helton, Holiday, Cargo, Tulo, Matt Holliday,
CJ Cron,
and Brenton Doyle. So the list kind of got muddy, but hey, if you remember, CJ Cron was a bad mother shut my mouth because he was great that month, August of 2021.
Yeah.
So now
He
Brenton
took us
Doyle,
to the Crone Zone.
yeah. So for Doyle to be, on that list, to be with those guys is, so incredible. Not bad for a guy who was a Division II draft pick. So
Yeah. And his numbers, his season numbers are not garish, but they are good. And the biggest thing that stands out is his improvement at OPS plus and WRC plus, where he's basically doubled them both.
Mm-hmm.
you talked about.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you talked about the improvement, and I don't think MLB has any kind of most improved player. And also, I don't know how you would quantify something like that. But obviously, you talk about the players who made the biggest jump from 23 to 24. Brenton Doyle has to be the one. And the thing that I know I was banging the drum about, I didn't think he would ascend to these heights that he's at right now and make you think, oh my God, he can go even higher offensively. But it kept coming back to the fact that in 2022, he played the entire year at AA Hartford. Like he came up for a little bit at the end of the year in AAA and had 57 plate appearances in the first month of the year in 2023 because he had gotten hurt. So he really didn't have a lot going for him above AA. So he was coming in saying, all right, well, we need you more for your defense than anything because we're done with the Jonathan Daza experiment. And it all became about Doyle. And now we're starting to see, all right, he caught his breath this offseason, retooled the swing a bit, and you're starting to see, the heights that he can reach offensively with the bat rather than just on the base path.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what his weighted runs created plus was last year?
No.
It was 43.
Oh.
That's a bad number. This year, it's 105.
Which still seems like it might be a little low. Yeah, his OPS is just straight up OPS was 53 last year.
Yeah. He struggled at the plate last year, and he admitted it, and we saw him make those changes in real time. We saw him work in real time. Then he worked in the offseason. He worked some more. And this guy's work ethic is just insane. And, man, I was a Brenton Doyle truther before he made his big league debut, when he won his minor league gold glove, and I was watching him and going, I think this guy might have a big league future. And people were like, I don't know, it's all minor league stuff, and he's got a lot to go with the bat. And now, years separated from that, in the second year of his big league career, we can have a conversation of like, this guy might just be a franchise center fielder for this team. And I like that. I like having that. I like Brenton Doyle. He's my favorite right now.
It's just been cool to see. I think that's been the biggest thing is here's a guy who was able to make adjustments and improve. Like we could visually see the night and day difference of he made some changes and they're paying off. Now, and we've seen it with some other guys, but I think for him, it's been so drastic. Here's what can happen when a guy continues to develop at the big league level, learns to make adjustments, and then he can find success.
Yeah, rather than just stopping.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a big leaguer now. I got this.
Yeah. But like not being satisfied with what he did and realizing, I got to make some changes. Because wasn't it the team wanted to, we'll wait until the offseason to make some changes. He's like, no, I need to do it now. And so then he starts doing it those last couple months. Mm-hmm. And now it's carried into this year. And who had Brenton Doyle hitting third in the Rockies lineup in 2024 on their bingo card? I don't think anybody did. But the fact that he's hit there a couple times now, he's wedged his way into the top of the lineup, or he's hitting in prime offensive positions in the lineup. Awesome development for him. And incredible outfielder to boot. Super good dude. Good stuff. We're really happy for him.
Yeah, so who are we to argue with all of Major League Baseball in declaring Brenton Doyle our position player of the month for July?
Let's see. Is there anybody I can argue for? Michael Tolia kept hitting home runs.
It's true. Totally. If not for...
all home runs.
If not for the insane July that Doyle had, I think there'd definitely be an argument for Tolia. And he's been a really entertaining ride since the start of June, where he's looking like a big leaguer. He's going out there and every day going, you don't get to send me back down. This is my job now.
Yeah, Tolia in July hit 233, 314, 567, had an 880 OPS. That was second on the team. 9 home runs. He had 21 hits, 3 doubles, 9 home runs. So, hey, about half of his hits were singles. It wasn't all extra base hits. He got some variety in there.
And you combine that with a sterling glove at first base.
Yeah.
Like,
really
it
good.
is really nice after having Chris Bryant at first base and a bunch of other guys who, I'm sorry, are just not starting first baseman, to have a guy who is going to vacuum the ball up at the corner.
Look, Evan, you came together with the idea, and we know Skyler's good at actually creating the memes. And I feel like one of my best skills is tweaking something that's already good and taking it to the next level. We basically have, if you're the first baseman of the Rockies, you're essentially the captain. Galarraga, right? Todd Helton, the Hall of Famer. We've heard how players, hold Mark Reynolds in reverence, right? We know what Justin Morneau was able to do in Chulo and Cargo's development in the middle of that lineup. So, as you said, Evan, you are not sending me back down. This is my position. I'm the captain now. That's Michael Tolia. You're right.
Look at me. I think in terms of like being the actual team captain, I think he can definitely develop into that. But we've seen a lot of, and it really has cleared up. But early in his career, there was definitely some immaturity from Tolia, because he's a young guy still. He's not, and he's still getting a little wet behind the ears when it comes to being a big leaguer. But I think this year we've seen him grow tremendously in terms of his emotional maturity and his playing skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been good to see, and that confidence in him. Like, hey, I'm playing every day. And so I think that's taken some weight off his shoulders where he's not having to press. Also, we'll shout out Ezekiel Tovar, who kind of had that slide, and then he really kicked into high gear. Had a 872 OPS in July. That was third on the team behind Doyle and Tolia. Had a 307 average. He was the only guy to hit over 300. He only had 2 walks, though, and 33 strikeouts. He's got to learn to draw some walks here and there.
17 game hit streak, right?
Yeah.
Longest in a couple years since Brendan Rodgers had that 20 game hit streak. So that was good.
Yeah. 6 home runs, 7 doubles, 31 hits, led the team along with his 16 runs scored. He's found a spot at the top of that lineup. Needs a little bit more refinement there before he really can kick it in. And part of that is stop swinging wildly at things at times. But
I always call it the Cargo approach. Cargo, when he was really young and he was at the end of his career, was there is no such thing as a breaking ball low and away that I will not swing at. And that's Tovar right now. But he's 23. He just turned 23. So I'm not pushing the panic button on that just yet.
Yeah, but I think we can be in agreement. Brenton Doyle, player of the month.
But it was a fun July, all things considered.
Yeah, that means August is going to be terrible.
Probably.
But moving on, pitcher of the month. And there are a few options this time around. And I think we can safely say Cal Quantrill is finally going to be dethroned thanks to a 7.54 ERA in the month of July. It was not fun sailing for Cal Quantrill, so his streak of 3 straight months comes to an end.
It was a good run, Cal.
We would have traded you if we could. But who are you thinking, Evan?
There's a couple pretty good picks. Honestly, where I would really like to hang my hat is Victor Vodnik. We've seen Victor Vodnik emerge as the guy that you can give the ball to in the 9th inning and not panic about it. He earned his first 4 career saves in the month of July over 11 outings with a 2.70 ERA. That is 13 1/3 innings. Struck out 13 batters, walked just 3 with a whip of 0.90. And you watch him pitch and you watch him become more confident, and you go and it's like, this kid's the closer. I think we've got ourselves a closer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a sneaky good pick. My vote would probably go to Kyle Freeland, 3-1 for the month. It was great to see him bounce back. Again, you start thinking about 2025, 2026. This team, for them to really get back on track with Marquez's future still so unknown, Senzatella's future unknown, coming back from Tommy John. Maybe he makes a start or two in September. But Kyle Freeland, does a nice job, 3.52 ERA. See the strikeouts are up just a touch. I thought he did a good job in the month of July.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And man, I think we're going to get 3 people here because I was also really close with Kyle Freeland, but I think Ryan Feltner would be it for me because Ryan Feltner had a really sneaky good month. Yes, he went 0-3, but in this era, can we really blame him? He gets very little run support a lot of the time, just like Kyle Freeland does times. But he had a 2.51 ERA over his 5 starts, 28 2/3 innings, 11 runs, only 8 earned, 28 strikeouts. He did struggle with walks, 15 walks, which not great, but he still battled. I think that was the nice thing is he was able to battle through the walks and didn't let things ramp out of control. So he was able to self-contain some things and really showed that growth we really needed from Ryan Feltner in the month of July. He's a good arm, and I think he showed more of that, a little bit more consistency. It's what he's been battling and really showed that out in July for me. So it's good to see him. And at the end of the day, it's all about preventing runs, and he's able to prevent some runs.
Oh, for sure. I would also like to give a shout out to, and this is nowhere near player of the month, but I do think he deserves a shout out for his month of July. TK Tyler Kinley. There's no argument from any of us. I think that he had a really bad first couple months of the season. And he wasn't perfect in July, but he had a 4.05 ERA. It was one of the most used relievers out of the bullpen. He pitched 13 1/3 innings, 16 strikeouts, still struggled a bit with some walks and did give up 2 home runs, but he looked a heck of a lot more like a guy you would want to turn to out of the bullpen than he did earlier this season. And, it sucked watching him struggle so much because I think we all like TK as a guy, and he was so much fun to watch before he got hurt. And I really hope this is him turning it around because, like you said earlier, Patrick, you need more than just one guy out of the bullpen that you can give the ball to.
And the Rockies have a decision to make when it comes to him because I know he's back next year for $3 million, but then there's a team option for 2026. In general, is the $3 million going to end up being too much for their blood? Teams can be very weird how they want to shave off an extra $25,000 and $100,000 when they're giving out, multi-million-dollar deals. So I think he'll be around for next year, but if the powers that be are looking at him and saying, $3 million, we might be able to go get a different veteran for that price and feel a little bit better about. But you're right. He's kind of turned it around a little bit this month. And so I think his spot in the bullpen is going to be safe for next year.
Yeah. Or could trade Chip in the offseason.
So the question is, of our 3 candidates, Kyle Freeland, Ryan Feltner, and Mr. Victor Wadnick, who do you say is the pitcher of the month? If we had to come to a consensus.
I would put Vodnik over Feltner. So I got Freeland, Vodnik, Feltner.
I would go Freeland as my top choice if I had to come to a consensus.
I would probably still go with Vodnik, but I could buy a Freeland argument.
So Freeland gets all the number 2 votes.
There you go.
Yeah, that's how it works. I mean, he got the most votes, just wasn't the most first place votes.
Hey, I will throw out this argument. Vodnik's efforts aren't as valuable without good efforts from the starting pitchers.
That's true. I don't disagree with that. I mean, it really is. It's one of those ones where in a month where pitching was kind of all over the place, it's nice to have 3 guys that we can all shout out as this guy was good this month.
Legit. Yeah. So is it Freeland, Vodnik, Feltner bringing home the bronze, because the Olympics.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Now we all stand for the playing of the national anthem.
For the playing of DJ Otzi, Hey Baby.
I always thought for some reason, I always thought it was the most hilarious thing whenever I thought of that. It's just, ladies and gentlemen, please rise, remove your caps for the singing of our nation's national anthem. And then just DMX starts playing. X gonna give it to you.
That'd be that. That would get me up. That would get me fired up. I'd be down for that.
I don't hate America, I promise. It's just a situation that makes me laugh when I think about it. For the singing of our nation's national anthem. X gonna give it to you. Come on, it's funny. It's funny. I don't know. Is it funny? Maybe it's not.
If DMX had not been deceased, I would say, hey, shoot, maybe he deserves a shot in the postseason to sing the national anthem. Couldn't be worse.
There you go. Yeah. But that'll do it here for this edition of Affected by Altitude. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. And Patrick, always appreciate you hopping on and sharing your insights with us.
That's what I love to do. As a Rockies insider, another shameless plug right there. Check that out. Starting on Monday, 5+ days a week.
Wow, that's a lot. We do it once a week. But
well, I record them all in one day, so you know what I mean.
There you go.
No, there's
going with the Wheel of Fortune approach.
There's a couple tricks behind the scenes you can do, but no, we'll be getting some post-game shows, pre-game, many of which will be live, having some guests on. It's going to be fun. Will you gentlemen be joining me at some point?
Depends on how big of a wallet you can provide me.
For me, it's more of
this one's kind of small, so
I need it. Like I don't even have to pay me. I literally need a new wallet. No, I'm more than happy to be on. It just depends on the time and if I am not at work.
Man, I really need to get a brand deal with Ridge wallets and just give them away to all my guests.
There you go.
Hey, if you're doing YouTube stuff, they are a very common sponsor.
Evan, pretty much when you come on, I'm just gonna share my screen and we're just gonna go on eBay and just look for the most random Rockies items. So we're gonna have a good time on that one. That's what Evan and I just messaged each other all day. Hey, did you see this old Portland Rockies reversible jersey? Yeah, but did you see this? That's what we like to do.
We found oh gosh, what was the name of the national anthem singer at the All-Star game whose dad was a Rockies coach?
Ingrid Andress. The dad's Brad Andress, 00.
Yeah, so we found a Brad Andress jersey on eBay.
You found it. I was impressed. You found that somewhere.
There you go. Dang.
00. And was it the sleeveless pinstripe too?
It was the sleeveless pinstripes.
Oof. I mean, that's an item right there.
There you go. Yeah, but in all seriousness, we would be more than happy to help you out whatever we can, Patrick.
Yeah.
Appreciate all you do.
Thanks,
and
Skyler.
Go find him there on the Twitters.
And you know what? My pay for you is when they host Adams State Day at Coors Field. You know, they make all the variant Colorado Rockies caps. Dude, get the limo coming out. Just 5-star. I'm going to give you that treatment on Adams State Day. I just got to check the promo calendar on that.
I'm 99% sure they don't have an Adams State Day.
No. What?
It's only a D2 school.
Guess I never have to pay for that one.
You can't knock D2 schools because Mr. Brenton Doyle at a D2 Shepherd.
There you go.
D2 Touche. Now we're
Evan,
off the rails. Now we're ready to close the show.
Yeah. Evan, where can the folks find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Evan_Lang27. I would love to hear from you unless you are demanding that I ask Bud Black why he hasn't resigned yet.
Evan and I have never talked to Bud Black.
Are your DMs open? Do you have open DMs here? What's the situation for you guys?
It's got to be a mutual follow.
Okay.
But I get a lot of weird people saying weird things to me on Twitter. You can also find me doing the Monday Rock Pile on purplerow.com. You can also find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on all of your favorite platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. And I would also like to say, knock, knock, open up the door, it's real. With the nonstop, pop, pop, the stainless steel. Go hard getting busy with it. But I got such a good heart that I'll make an MFer wonder if he did it.
Is that a Bill Schmidt quote about the trade deadline?
It is.
Oh,
dang. It was really nice to hear him just open up his heart after the deadline. I know it's a tough job being the GM.
Drop those bars sometimes. But you can find me
where can we find you?
over on Twitter at sideline_crowd, and over writing Wednesday Rock Piles for Purple Row, and doing some stuff for fansfirstsports.com. And then also check out Every Rocky Ever. There will be a new episode this week where we talked about some 3 closers for the Rockies.
Are you going to spoil it, or is it going to be a tease?
They're better. They're good closers.
I'll say this. Okay, so we were talking about Victor Vodnik because I never want to wrap up shows. You know that. So Victor Vodnik, I realized, I go, oh my God, he's got a strikeout in his last 17 appearances. Using the wonderful stat head feature on Baseball Reference, streaks of 17 or more games for strikeouts for a reliever, because starting pitchers they almost all have that. As it turns out, that is tied for the 4th longest streak of all time for a Rockies reliever.
Wow.
Number 1 being Adam Ottavino, 22, Scott Oberg, 18, Brian Fuentes, 18. Victor Vodnik is in some pretty good company right now. Did any of those 3 guys make Every Rockies Ever this week, Skyler?
No, because we've already talked about Brian Fuentes with you on an episode.
That's right.
And we have not touched the others yet.
When is the episode about Jair Jurgens?
Jar Jar Jurgens?
Do you wash your hair with Jurgens soap? No comment. Do you remember when they did the what was the name of the league that they did in Saudi Arabia? They did in the Middle East. What was that called? I totally forgot.
The most recent one?
Yeah.
I don't think it was
Just
based out of
season.
Saudi. It was called like United Baseball or something.
Yeah. United Baseball League, maybe. Well, Jair Jurgens was selected to participate in that. The jersey that they used was like a 4th of July Rockies jersey, despite the fact that Jurgens played for the Rockies twice and once was on 4th of July. So you actually can find the start. That was the one where he went out and had to go to the hospital, and he had trouble breathing and he had all these issues. Had a great career with Atlanta. But for some reason, the United League, is that it? But anyway, they chose to use a Rockies graphic. That was crazy. How did we get on this?
Recent one.
He has played as recently as this year with the Olmecas de Tabasco in the Mexican League.
Ooh. It's a spicy pronunciation.
Mm-hmm. No, Jar Jurgens, so I always called him. Jair Jurgens was not in the episode. It was
Rafael Betancourt.
We talk about Betty.
Jose Jimenez.
I think so. Yes, it was Jose Jimenez.
Man,
Oh,
I legitimately, as a kid, loved Jose Jimenez. I thought he was the coolest.
And let's see if I can go 3 for 3. Dave Veras.
No.
I also very much like nice guy, Dave Veras.
Cherry Creek. He's a Denver guy.
It was one of few Rockies closers to pitch in the postseason.
Manny Corpus. I mean,
nope.
Okay.
Houston Street.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, we talk about them. It's a good little conversation between my brother and I.
He just had a birthday the other day. Houston Street, only relief pitcher in Rockies history to win Player of the Week award. Boom.
Would you like to know something very weird?
Yes.
Victor Vodnik is already tied for 32nd for most career saves in a Rockies uniform.
I like that.
In front of him is some guys that I bet a lot of people don't remember, like Jay Powell, Mike Munoz, Jairo Diaz, and Justin Spire.
Mm-hmm. Good names.
I love how we always run so long when it's just the 3 of us, because we will just babble on
Yeah.
about this forever.
We were so close to ending. Sorry, Skylar.
Because I bring up Every Rocky Ever, and then you guys just want to
Yeah. And then we basically record an intro for your next recording. Yeah. So there you go. Just
so
go
next week on Every Rocky Ever, Jair Jurgens.
Yeah.
There you go. Hey, we got to hammer through some of those randos. Get them out of the way. There's a lot. Turns out there's a lot more than you'd think. Quite a few. But yeah, it's a fun little episode. So you can check that out on Wednesday here on our YouTube channel and your favorite podcasting platform. Just look up Rocky Mountain Rooftop, and it'll be Every Rocky Ever. Good stuff. But that'll do it here. We'll close this thing out. As always, appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, I'm Skyler. That's Evan. We've been joined by Patrick Lyons. Evan, hit him with it.
Damn right, and I'll do it again because I'm so lights.
No.
I got going to win.
Farewell.
Y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here.